Ciao people, and welcome to the 5th episode of Making Movies with Mattia, the podcast for the people who work or want to work in the entertainment industry. I'm Mattia Capasso, and today I'm here to present for the first time an experienced assistant director who also worked as a director, video editor, producer, and as a photographer. She worked on many film production, branded content, music video, and commercials, both independent and big budget. With more than 10 years of experience on set, she managed to travel around the world, working for many years in UK, but also in the Bahamas, USA, and Spain. Outside the production job, she also helps to support crews with their mental health. Without further ado, please give a welcome to Alex Mill.
Thank you.
Too much presentation.
This still sounds so good. I can't believe that I done so many things.
I hope I didn't take the show because I think
No.
now the end, can we finish everything?
No, not at all. Now we're digging all into that.
Jokes on side. First of all, how are you?
I'm really good, actually. How have you been?
Quiet during those moments. Luckily, I'm keeping myself busy making this show, so really keep me entertained a lot. So I'm enjoying, and in the same time, I'm also working, even if a bit more quiet due the COVID situation. But good. Of course. As I mentioned before, you are you work mainly as AD, and also other role you cover during your past year. Tell me more about your job. What do you do mostly? As explain me what is an assistant director to those who doesn't know what is.
Strangely, if you walk on set, and if you've never been on set before, you would think that the assistant director is actually the director, because usually you're hearing the assistant director the most, as well as they are the most animated people. They are the most vocal people on set. So technically the role of the assistant director is to run a set. We are the only people who are showing up without any gear or anything specifically technical. We show up as ourselves, pretty much like actors, that they use their bodies as their instrument. We show up with a skill of timing, communication, collaboration, and that's what brings everybody together. We are the pieces who kind of sit outside and look at the entire set, have the ability, have the oversight to make sure that everything gets ready on time, make sure that multiple things are happening at the same time, keeps checking on people, whether they are okay, whether they need any help with their job roles, whether they have everything that they need to get the shot done. And that's on set. Most of my experience is with commercials. So commercials are structured very differently from films, music videos, promos, things like that. So on commercials, mostly what an assistant director is doing is happening during the day. Part of the job when you are doing something longer term, such as shows or TV or films, then you have a lot of preparation time in pre-production. People usually, if you have a script already developed and more or less ready to go, production companies usually bring on assistant directors as one of the first roles, because you're the one who's breaking down a script in terms of timelines, a schedule, not just a shooting schedule, but you can have an influence on the pre-production schedule itself as well. Say that you have a very location heavy shoot, then you would suggest that find the locations first in terms of timing. Make sure that the locations are available for your shooting times, and maybe only after secure actors, especially not the principal actors, but the supporting actors. Ask them second, because your locations are going to be the more prominent in the film. Or if you have the flip side, that you're working with high profile actors, then you as the assistant director can suggest that work around their time frame, their schedule, and then we're gonna just maybe work with contingency locations or contingency plans for other bits and pieces of the shoot. So you have a lot of influence on how the actual film is going to look from a very second-hand influence or impact. On the day, you're pretty much communicating all day long. And for me, one of the beauties of the assistant director role is that you're pretty much done with the project once principal photography or pickups are done. Unlike directors, producers, sometimes even people who are just brought back for post-production as a consultant or a guide, they can live with projects for years. Assistant directors are usually pretty early on in the project's life. They emerge, they appear very early on, but they are finished as soon as photography is done and they are going on to the next project. That's about what our job role is.
Cool. Just a moment, this is a timeout, and I'll go with the next question. Just a moment, I want to check. I mean, just everything is recorded, so no worry.
Yeah.
Just a moment.
It's useful in the beginning. It's like we haven't lost much.
No. A moment. Yeah. Okay. Luckily, I realize now. No worry. Everything is. That's why I have two recorder, one on Zoom and one on this other program. The other program did not record my voice, but your, yeah. So it's easy. I can edit both of them. So I will go with the second question. Okay.
Sure.
Cool. Really, just of course, for many that don't understand the difference. So you are the one organizing, the one that like a choreographer. Can we say like this?
Strangely, it's interesting that you use that phrase. When you have more technical things to film than you have professionals. One of the professions that I'm training in is to be an intimacy coordinator on set, because I work a lot with that side of the mentality or human psyche or life. But you can have fight coordinators, you can have dance coordinators, you can have very special people who are, they know a very narrow line of work, but they're absolute specialists at that. ADs are a bit more like spread out thinly. We're a bit of a jack of all trades. So when, especially on lower budget projects, when you don't have the time or the budget to bring in someone special, and it's not a scene that would require anything that's dangerous, that needs a stunt coordinator. But I have choreographed scenes when it's like a chase sequence or a police raid or something that requires a lot of movement. In that sense, yes, assistant directors are absolutely choreographers, because you're bringing in cast and crew and you have the oversight of how, not just what's happening in front of camera, but also what's happening behind camera, and you're managing the entire floor. Yeah.
Cool. This is a question really comes to my mind now, and for sure it might sound repetitive. What's the difference from director and assistant director?
Technically, first of all, film is a very hierarchical, not in a bad way, but in a very structured, very linear institution or industry. So technically, directors and assistant directors belong to different departments. It becomes very important when in the American system, you have the guild system. In the UK, you have branches, back to branches, who would, they are your work right group who would support you in work right issues or payment issues or things like that. And so we are part of, we're different branches. The assistant directors are part of, sometimes they have their separate own branches, but technically we belong to production. When you see trucks and trailers on a film shoot, ADs and production share the
Yeah.
same trailer. We belong to the same little box. So I would say that the main difference creatively would be that the director is dealing with a more intuitive, talent-based creativity, while the assistant director is responsible for the crew's creative process. We are linear processing, while directors are having an impact on the overall outcome of the image, of the overall mood of the project. They are overseeing the creative side of it. We're overseeing the linear technical side of it. So we're very much supporting each other. And it that's why I was saying that usually when people just walk on film set and they've never been on a film set before, sometimes you can mistake the assistant director for the director, because it depends on countries and it depends on the relationship between the director and the assistant director. But sometimes it's the assistant director who calls the shots. They are calling action. It's always the director who calls cut, but it's you. Well, sometimes if it's a technical shoot, then the assistant director can call cut as well. But it's very frequently the assistant director who's effectively running the set and telling people when to start a shoot.
Cool. One thing I want to add, me as runner, that until the beginning, I didn't know what was an assistant director. I make really many time confusion between assistant director and assistant to director, that are really definitely two different roles. And also, of course, I don't want to introduce also what's the difference between the first, the second, and the third. I will go with episode by episode. But I asked this question for the audience who doesn't know what is an assistant director. So that's good answer you gave me. Of course, this is mainly your duty. I know you have many other roles, as I mentioned before. Tell me about your job background. Where did you start and how did you manage to get where are you now?
I started about 10 years ago. My first introduction to film, or the film industry itself. I mean, when you talk about film industry, it can be a very broad definition. I started at a very small production company. I was doing camera work, I was doing sound, I was doing a lot of editing, and we did mainly corporate films, some newsreel B-roll footage, which means that I was responsible for not the interview parts of a newsreel footage, but just a pan of a building or a close-up of a statue or something like that for newsreels, for local newsreels. And I did a lot of editing on personal films, weddings.
If I can, apology for interrupt you. Did you come from university? Did you study film during college?
After that, so I started working when I was 19 for this small production company. Then I went to the States for 2 years to work on a cruise ship as a photographer.
Nice.
That was interesting. And then only after that, I went to London and I had a 1-year course at Central Film School London. I'm not sure that they're still doing that course. Back then it was called the Industry Filmmaking Diploma course. And I personally really enjoyed it because it was one of those practical courses that we didn't have any of the essay writing thing. We didn't analyze films. It was all about making films. So we've done something like 20, 25 short pieces, because we were working on each other's projects all the time in 1 year. So that was a really good, it was also a really good introduction to the industry. I did not know I didn't even know that there is such a role as assistant director. And it opened my eye up to a couple of things. And of course, it introduced me to people who are now lifetime friends.
Nice, nice. And of course, you learn mostly by working, right? By being on set.
Pretty
But
much. Technically what I'm doing now, or what I've done the next 7 years, that had nothing to do with what I've learned in film school. And I've seen a lot of film school graduates since then. I've worked on a couple of film school projects as well, short film projects, and it varies. But some schools are mainly teaching and training people to have some sort of a director or producer role. And they're pretty much, if you really want to specialize in the many roles that you can have on film set, you pretty much need to learn it either on the job or in a mentorship from someone who's already in the industry, or have a specialized course. You know, they have special courses for each department's job titles. But it's very true that, especially, I worked in a couple of different countries, so I have the experience of culture on set. The best teacher is the personal first-hand experience, because you get to see how things are done in that specific region, in that specific country area. What are the shorthands? What are the tips and tricks that you can very easily pick up while once on set? But it would require just hours and hours of studies to be able to conceptually understand what those nuances are. While it's a little bit like riding a bike, that once you're actually in it, you're instinctively picking it up, because it's just within the culture.
True. Another question, this one mostly related to your job on set. Did you have any difficult moment when you were working as AD?
I mean, you have the standards when when you're fighting against the elements, natural elements. Or one of the lowest moments of my life was when I just had to clean up dead rats, because we were shooting at a location that was run down. Dead rat animals.
Oh my God.
Sometimes things like that happen. But I would say that as an AD, the most difficult moments were when one of the departments are just not as well equipped, not as strong, not as well put together. Maybe they are lacking a person, or maybe you're completely missing a department. On smaller scale projects, especially in promos, it happens a lot when you just simply don't have an art department, a costume department. Sometimes you don't have makeup. I'm not saying that I could do makeup, but sometimes I was single-handedly responsible for what an art department would be responsible for, because we didn't have an entire department. So those are the trickiest moments, when you kind of have to double up and you have to do a different job role as well as your job, because you're focusing on two very different things. And obviously you're a specialist in one of those things, so the other thing is going to be suffering because you're not the professional in that other area. So it all comes down to budget usually. But when in film, it's when you step on set, it's usually very important that even if you can do someone else's job, if you do have the professionals there to do it, you should not step in and do someone else's job, even if it's cable bashing, picking up something that you shouldn't be touching. You really should not be touching other departments' territories. So that's tricky when you have to double up.
Of course, you mentioned that you're also like a mental coach. How do you call?
Yes. What I'm doing right now is it has to do with intimacy coaching. A
Mm.
year and a half ago, I moved to Ibiza, and I'm just about to move back to London. And since then, I was away from the industry, and it was a personal development for me as well, a very spiritual, very deep personal development. And it came out of an interest. It was just something that my friends constantly complimented me on, that I have the empathy, I have the insight, especially into relationships, intimate relationships, as well as mental health and emotional health. And because I have this double background, that I also have the understanding of the industry, I personally really enjoy working with filmmakers, crew members, artists, creatives of any kind, because we speak the same language. And based on that, now that I'm going back to London, I'm actually training to be an intimacy coordinator, which is a completely new job role. It didn't exist before. It's
It's
something like
it's not
it's
related
it,
to the production, right?
it it's it's going to become, for now it's a very, very small section of filmmaking itself. It's going to become something like a fight coordinator. When you have something dangerous on set, you have to call in a specialist, you have to call in an armorer who's trained in weaponry or something like that. An intimacy coordinator is called in when you're shooting intimate scenes, when you have especially scenes that are related to sexual abuse, or working with minors who are pretending to be a different age, or when you have a story that involves sexuality around minors. It's very, very important, and we are very much at the infancy of it, to be able to provide guidance, training around consent, around healthy intimacy, healthy sexuality within the context of a professional working environment, because we're simulating everything. So how can we simulate with the without the methods of such so-called geniuses as Kubrick? Because there were some people throughout film history who were famously really cruel to their talent and their crew in order to achieve a certain result, and that's just not okay anymore. So once I'm done with that training, I might come back as an intimacy coordinator to talk about that.
Cool. Yeah, no, I heard that this kind of role that is also born after the Me Too movement, some sort of,
Yeah.
because many actors also complain to be forced on doing some, let's say, sexy scene that they don't appreciate or they were unaware to do it.
Yeah, it's the same thing as we are imitating fighting. Actors are not, sometimes they are not even trained in a single punch or anything. You can cause harm. If you have any weaponry, you can cause harm not just to your fellow actors, but to the entire
Yeah.
crew, to the entire production. There are famous stories about actors or somehow camera equipment breaking just because they shot a bullet into it or shot an arrow into it. So
One,
it's the same thing with intimacy, that
yeah.
you can cause a lot of mental and emotional harm with just being inconsiderate around intimacy. And we are, we, as a society, collectively, we are just about to understand what sexual abuse is about, what's okay, what's not okay. We're quite okay in understanding of what physical abuse is, but we're very, very much at baby steps with understanding what emotional abuse is and mental abuse. So it's really important to look at the human behind the job title. And for now, since I'm not in London, so it's just a little bit tricky to do anything that's not online. For now, I'm doing counseling, coaching on a more personal side in people's personal lives, in their personal relationships, how to have a healthy work-life balance, how to have healthy, authentic relationships, intimacy in their lives. Because film people are these crazy cats who wake up at stupid hours, go to bed at stupid hours, and sometimes we literally go to a studio while it's still dark, then work in a dark studio for the entire day and go home when it's already dark. So that can cause a lot of mental, emotional issues, which then would come about as physical, materialized health issues. If we don't support this body on every level of consciousness, then at some point it's going to show up in work that we're just not going to be able to perform. That's what happened to me. That's why I came to Ibiza. I had a breakdown.
Cool. Good to know what else you're also doing. And I saw your website, your other website, and I'll make sure to share on the poster together, of course, with your whatever, all the links you gave me. This is mostly a question, of course, with COVID and everything, production and crew are really struggling on, let's say working in a not proper way, but in good mental health. So, what tips would you give to those struggling with their mental health in this tough situation that we are facing with COVID?
It's a very layered question. If your mental health is affected by the lack of work, which then comes with the lack of money, then it immediately becomes a completely multi-layered question. So, it's a very personal, very individual issue for everyone, what they're dealing with right now. If your financial situation is affected, then the best advice that I could possibly give to anyone is to not give up. Try contacting old contacts, try putting together projects with people who are in a similar situation as you are. Many very creative projects have come out of this situation, shot on Zoom. Entire movies and shows are made on Zoom now. So there's a lot of creativity coming out of this very interesting situation. So if you gather together still in these circumstances, then in my experience, that has helped me a lot to feel like that I'm not alone with it, to feel like that we can still be creative, we can still have fun, we can still be close to each other, we can still agree on things when there's so much disagreement outside in the world. If you are back on set and it's just tense because you can hear those rumors and stories and news that are coming out of very large productions.
Oh yeah.
I I would say that kindness, first and foremost, human kindness. There are two types of people, or people usually tend to deal with stress, anxiety, depression in two different ways. They either completely try to suppress it to the point when they become paralyzed and decapacitated, they become very shy, very reserved, very repressed, or they overreact and they act out. It can come across as you literally don't talk to anyone for the entire day. You're trying to run away and hide away from everybody on set. You're just trying to make it through the day. Don't talk to me. I'm just here to do my job, just boxed in, don't want to know anything about anybody else. Or you become that person on set who everybody else runs away from or tries to avoid, because you are just that presence, that voice that is coming with aggression or passive aggression. None of those things are healthy ways of dealing with stress. That's an internal conflict. And these are very stressful times. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, possibly a lot of depression running around in the collective field. So
especially in our kind of job, where even before COVID, we used to do like more than 12-hour shift, early wake up, lack of sleep.
yeah, it's film is definitely not for the faint-hearted. But strangely, I might have just been really, really lucky. I've had a couple experiences when it was just really tough to get through the day, but mostly I've had very good people to work together with. Even if we've seen that the project itself is not the most amazing, the script is not brilliant, somehow the crew and cast were able to forge friendships, relationships that stay with you after the shoot. For me, that's the most important thing, that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how much effort and energy we've put into the film itself or into the product itself if we as the individuals are going home feeling less than before. For me, what's most important is to, and my simplest way to explain it is the word kindness, is to walk away from a day's shoot, a month's shoot, 6 months, feeling like you've gained something. You've gained experience, you've gained friends, you've gained emotions and memories that are happy, that are carrying you forward, that you don't walk away with that bitter feeling that, well, I struggled through it, I've made it through. Because the quality of your life, the quality of a human life is not worth ruining for a film or a project.
True, true. Really, really true. Nice what you said. Now, of course, outside the negative part that might be
Yeah.
our jobs, let's talk now positive things. Tell me
Good.
any memorable moment you have during your work.
I try to think about it. I have a lot of those moments when it was just a really, really nice environment. I really loved working together with those people. Once we've shot a film when 98% of the script was set in a theater setting. So we hired a theater for a month and we quite literally lived in that theater for a month. And it was brilliant because I loved the people. But those are not really, you really have to be in the moment. You really have to experience it to have the understanding of what made that environment good. So I have a little story that people can relate to that really shifted something in me.
Say.
I was working on a film with Liam Neeson, and it was something like, it was a reshoot or something, but it was a very short shoot, a week or something, week and a half. And I was a runner on it, a PA. And once it was my job to just ferry him back and forth between set and his trailer, because you just have to accompany adult men from A to B, apparently, at Pinewood. And it was a very, very sweet moment when we're just walking side by side for like a couple of seconds. And he just turns to me and asks, "How are you today?" "I'm good."
Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson, yeah.
Cool.
And then he goes, "What's your name?" "I'm Alex." And he just says, "Hi, I'm Liam." And it was such a beautiful moment when I realized that they are just people. It doesn't matter how big names they are, how much money they make. At the end of the day, he's just Liam. And he can still be so humble and down to earth to introduce himself to another human being when they meet for the first time. So that was one of those moments when I realized that and ever since, I never really felt starstruck, but ever since, I hold this memory somewhere in the back of my mind that he's just a guy, she's just a girl, they are just people.
Good. You're not the only one who say about this on working with Liam Neeson. I had recently a colleague I work really recently, and he told me, a bit his experience of working with a few actors that, they were really polite. He told me, his experience he had with years ago working with Jeff Goldblum, Chris Pratt, that every one of them were nice, especially with the crew. Liam Neeson, they say, is one of the best guy they work
Yeah.
with. First, because he's polite, and as you said, he act like just a person. And second, one thinks every kind of crew appreciate when people remember names. He was
Yeah.
one of these guy that he see you, ask your name once, and he gonna remember forever.
Yeah.
This is what this guy told me.
Yeah. And
Unfortunately, I never work with, I never seen, and I hope to see. So
there
it's nice that you all also tell me this experience.
exactly. There are so many people out there. I mean, mostly through very short experiences, or like we shot a promo for Star Wars, or we shot a promo for Avengers. So I met a few names, A-listers names, and honestly, most of them are really, really kind and sweet people, because I genuinely believe that when you get to a certain level of professional career, you really realize that it makes no sense to be unkind, to be cruel to other human beings, because it reflects back on you as well. There is no reason for you to be a star, because we're not in that culture anymore. We're living in a social media culture, but people are sharing more about their personal lives than ever. We're not living in that studio star system anymore. Those stars don't exist. It's all the media fluff around them that blows up this whole thing that somebody is a celebrity. But people that they themselves, celebrities, usually don't enjoy being followed and harassed. So it's a lot easier to be just a normal human being who people don't put on a pedestal, but they can have normal conversations with.
True, true. This is, I know this show is not made for pointing finger or to complain, but it's not a complaint. Mostly, what I see on my point of view on the social, this virtual life that is social media that
Yeah.
is really, really easy to judge, especially because now it's not only how people share their feeling and stuff, but also the news. What
Yeah.
I'm don't making name, I don't make stuff, but it's easy now. See, what I always call the clickbaiting. The clickbait is news is just the usual news about what that guy said, what that guy did, what and people tend really, really to judge and not see what's the truth. So that's why we are, as I always say, misinformed about the production process. We see mostly the gossip behind it, but not the hard work of how certain people put on it. The kindness that many, for sure, in the production put. So if the audience here are listening, please, please, if you don't know nothing about how the production work, see how they work. Don't see the gossip. Maybe few curiosity, but we are still people. We are still people. We still make mistake, and it's mm, fine to make mistake until it's some mistake are can this mistake can be forgiven.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry,
There,
silly word that I said, but
there's an absolute separate industry who are relying on paparazzi, whose job is to blow up news.
true.
Sometimes it's completely false. And that industry is separate from the film industry. Sometimes the assets, the talent, has a crossover between the two industries, but that news industry, if you can call it news, tabloid news, that is a completely separate entity from the film industry or from the advertising industry. Advertising industry is a little bit different, but film industry is completely separate.
Entertainment industry,
Yeah,
as I was, if we need to talk in general.
yeah,
Yeah, no, really, really wise thing you said. What are, yeah, and this is always another, let's say, positive question. Of course, you mentioned that during those days you are um, doing mostly intimacy coordinator. Outside, of course, you can mention also this thing you are doing. Do you have, I know with the COVID and stuff, maybe there's more struggling on making project, but are you working in some project? Is there something coming up? Even if you are directing or, assistant directing?
That's one of the reasons actually why I'm moving back to London, because I kept getting calls and they kept asking that, hey, can you come next week? Can you come tomorrow? And I'm like, I'm living in a different country. But one of the reasons why I'm going back is because I'm going back on reshoots for an independent film called Faith. If you know anything about Ashley Chin, he's directing, he co-wrote the script as well, and we started shooting it 2 years ago and we just couldn't finish it because of circumstances, and I'm going back to have a bit of a top up on that. And apart from that, I have a couple projects that I'm working on. So I'm writing something very, very interesting. I'm writing a format that I've never seen before. It's one of those, it's almost like a multiplayer game, but in a story format, in a script format, in a
Nice.
very short format, that it's almost like a crossover between a video game format and a series. Yeah.
In where we, if I can know, where is going to be shown if once it's been done? Like you say, a mix between a video game.
I mean, the project itself, it's in its infancy. I'm only writing it. It's
Okay.
typically one of those projects that's perfect for streaming. So I'm aiming for one of the streaming services. But we can be creative with it, and we might just create an entire website for it and just release it on its own. It's one of those projects that I've genuinely never seen a structure like this anywhere else before. So I'm partly very excited about that, partly very excited about the story itself. So
Can't wait to watch it.
I know, I cannot wait to finish it writing it.
Take your time. There's no rush.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Maybe last question, but if it comes something else, I might ask you. This one, of course, for the audience, for everyone who are listening, and you are an experience, have more than 10 years of experience working on set. For those who want to follow your step, what would you recommend? What do you recommend for those starting out?
Oh, it was even tricksy when I was starting out, and I don't even want to imagine how difficult it must be right now when everybody is just scraping for jobs. For me, the most challenging or tricky thing was when I was starting out is to actually get paid for what I was doing. Because the best advice that I can give is that this industry is still run on relationships, not in terms of nepotism of who you know,
Mm.
that still exists, but you really have to show yourself, because it's really about personality, whether they're going to call you back on the next project and the next project. There are people who have been doing the same job role for 20, 25 years, and they just keep going from job to job. If they like a team, they like bringing the same people on from one project to the next, because they develop a shorthand, they develop a personal relationship with the people that they work together with. So it's really important to build relationships. For that, I would suggest to just go on as many shoots as possible. First, you start out as a runner, which is a PA in the American system.
Oh yeah.
But you can be an assistant in specific job roles as well. You can be a camera assistant, you can be a sound assistant, you can be a costume assistant, you can be a makeup assistant. And you might not get paid in the beginning, but it builds your CV and it builds your contacts. And I cannot tell you what to do and what not to do. So I cannot just go, don't be like that. But try to just be yourself. You don't have to struggle through the day. If you're really struggling with anxiety, you're just dropped into this environment, you don't know what's what, or if you're really super excited and if you really want to touch everything and talk to everyone, just take a step back and just realize that at some point you're going to be the person who has been doing this job for 10, 15, 20, 50 years. So you really don't have to project something that you're not. If you don't feel confident, you don't have to show as if you would be the most experienced person on set. You can genuinely ask questions. People like to explain what they're doing, not in the middle of a busy set, but when there's a moment off or when you see that there are quiet periods. It's really important to ask if you don't know something. People like to talk about what they're doing and build relationships, which is best to do in person on set. If you send out a million CVs, cold calling, if genuinely, if they look at a CV and they don't know any of the names on your CV, you're pretty much considered a nobody. So just, if you have no idea what job role you want to take, being a runner is a really good first experience. Although you will end up in the assistant directing department. A general runner belongs to the assistant directing department, which means that you're going to deal with job roles, job titles. I've had runners like that before, when it's like they want nothing to do with assistant directing. They want it to be in camera or sound, but they just didn't understand that there are assisting roles within that department itself. So if you go on set as a runner, you're going to be considered an AD or part of the AD department. And so if you have no idea what you want to do, it's very useful to be a runner. Or, if it's not a set-based job, but it's a production-based job, you can have a production runner role. Mostly you're going to be driving a car back and forth. but it's still, you're part of the production office or part of the post-production office, if that's what you want to do. And build up personal contacts. They might pay back years down the line, but when they do pay back, they pay back so well.
These tips, really useful tips, and especially for me that I'm still a runner. So good to get also personally those recommendations you give me. And yeah, really, you're really right on this. Many AD I've been in contact with, they always tell me this, just based on connection, and seems a bit bad to say, but good recommendation. Because as you mentioned, once you start working, it's good to know someone, but it's also good that the guy you still need to give a good impression on him, on how you manage to work. So
yeah, exactly. That's when it comes back to kindness, that people who go from project to project, like I generally, I've lost count. So sometimes I don't remember faces or names, because I worked in job roles when you work on a project for a day or two and then you go on to the next one. So it's just so quick for me that I genuinely don't remember names or faces. But I do remember very good people and very bad people. So if you want to be put in one of the memorable categories, you better be in the good, kind category. Conscientious, hardworking, down to earth, approachable, interested, open.
True. No, really good, everything you told me. Really nice background, even your, because you are the first guest. Maybe I mentioned before record. You are the first guest didn't manage to work with. So it's good to have this detail. More question I don't have, actually, because you reply to everything I need to ask. I hope, of course, the one listening learn from this conversation. I want to say thank you for joining as guest.
Thank you. And like this is immediately like it's just human nature that as soon as you said that we've never worked together before, I just the first thought in my mind was that, hey, I'm coming back to London. We're gonna work together. You know,
Happy to
next time I
join.
need a runner, I know who
Happy
to
to
call. That's
join.
it.
Nobody, feel free. Feel free to call me, or if in case the good things are talking about connection. If in case I cannot be available for a job, you call me. I have plenty of other people I met during work, and sending detail in case you are unavailable. So this is a recommendation I give for the audience. Build also contact, because one day you can be called and not be there. Give the opportunity to one you like.
Yeah. And one more tip then. In the beginning, I think I still do it, but I just haven't been on set I haven't seen a new call sheet for ages. So, but I think I still have the habit of it. But in the beginning, I did it religiously, that I saved everyone's number from the call sheet who would be relevant. And still to this day, I have a lot of producer friends who just ping me that, do you have a good production designer? Do you have a good sound? Do you have a good camera? Whatever. And I just send them contacts. And I've become the go-to person for a contact list. So that can be one of the ways of just, paying it forward, paying it back, to have that personal relationship that at some point turns into professional relationships.
True, true. Thank you for your detail.
Thank
Um,
you.
really, I hope really we can work together. Of course, I
Yeah.
will do the same. Once you come to London and they are looking for an AD, you're on list now.
There you go. That's how it goes.
And make sure to share, of course, your website link through the post page I will share. And thank you again. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Um,
good luck with the show.
Good luck, you too. And thank you for you, listener, who get through here. And I will see you to next episode. Ciao.